Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest. Okay, guys. So today we are excited to have our friend Cameron Huddleston, who is with us. And JJ, she has quite the confession.
True, very true.
She will be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with respect to caregiving. I think we all can relate. But like all of us, honestly, Cameron has been a caregiver, but she's so much more than that. She's pretty flipping amazing. And so, Jay, I want you to share with our friends, our listeners, a little bit about Cameron.
Natalie, I feel like we always start with we love our guest. And
we do love our guests.
Here's the deal. But I worry about that day when we say, I really don't like that guest, so we got to be.
Oh my God, she sucks. That's terrible. We're terrible. We're sad you're here.
I know. So don't tell Cameron that. So no. Cameron, we're so glad you're here. So we are so glad that Cameron is here. Seriously.
It's true.
Cameron, we met at the Care Colloquium back in November. And Cameron, you are truly a like-minded sister is what we're going to call you. Because we did not realize that we are almost the same in age. We're very young, and that we went to school
very young,
not 45 minutes away from each other.
Oh,
which was
that's right.
Yeah, total touching
Wait, I'm touching my pearls because I think she went to W&L.
She did.
Yes, that's Washington Lee for all you people who don't know what W&L is.
So right up the street, Cameron is, she's an author, she's a speaker, and she's also an award-winning journalist with 20 years of experience writing about personal finance. So I know we're all going to be able to learn a little bit about that.
Hello. Okay.
She wrote a book based on her experience with her caregiving with her mom. Her book is called Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk. And it's about how to have essential conversations with your parents about their finances, because finances in our family were taboo. Cameron, I'm glad that you're here today because we asked people what they want to talk about on the show. And what we've gotten a lot is people that are what's known as a sandwich generation. So your mom was 65 and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and you were how old?
35.
And you had how many
Two kids at the time. At the time, I added another one because, I didn't need any extra stress in my life, right?
Let's just add another. What's another in a group of several?
How old were your girls?
2 and 4 when my mother was diagnosed.
Wow.
In fact, one of the things I remember well is that we celebrated my second daughter's second birthday at my house, and my mom was there. She celebrated with us. And then we went on a trip. Actually, we went to Michigan because one of my girls' babysitters was getting married, and they were flower girls in the wedding.
Yeah.
And we came back. So this was, several weeks after my daughter's birthday. We come back, and there's a sign on our front door that my mom had left that said, "Happy birthday, Zoe." And I was like, oh my gosh, my mother must have forgotten that we had celebrated my daughter's birthday. We had been seeing signs that there was memory loss, but there was not a diagnosis at that point. And I was just like, this is not good. This is not good at all.
Yeah.
So that helped get the ball rolling for a diagnosis. And the first doctor she saw, I was not with her. And so she said that she was okay. So either she lied or the doctor didn't do a good job of testing her.
She just didn't tell the full truth, I guess.
I don't know.
We could say.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. And so when a friend of hers convinced her several months later to see another doctor, I went with her. That time.
All right.
There you go.
And the doctor confirmed what I already knew, that she had Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
And that began my journey as a
Yeah.
caregiver.
So she was still, I mean, I know she was showing the signs, of course, of Alzheimer's, but she was still living by herself.
Yes.
So still
She
in good
was.
health, basically.
Yes. Great health. Great
Yeah.
health. She and my father had gotten divorced when I was in college.
Mhm.
And actually my father had passed away when he was 61.
Yeah.
And so my mom she was on her own. She was in great health. Like what she had, she'd picked up swimming. Like she was active when she was younger, but not as active when she was raising me and my sister. But she had been swimming for a few years. I mean, she was slim and she looked great. She was a smoker when I was growing up, and she had quit smoking when I was 18. So health-wise, she was doing pretty well. And I really never expected to have to care for my mom because she was doing so well and she was functioning independently great.
Yeah.
Wow. So that feels good. So as we're aging, you can age well. I mean, if you think about it, you can clean up your health. I mean, the fact that your mom was swimming and things like that, I'm like, dude, I should start swimming. So, so then she gets diagnosed. Keep going, Jay.
So she gets diagnosed, but you said she's living by herself. The only thing that we've got then is just some cognitive decline. So she stays in her house, Cameron. I mean, you've not moved her in, and you're still able to you're working, right? You have two littles, you're working.
I'm working.
And you're married.
So I'm married. And so what I knew as a personal finance journalist, my first thought goes to the financial side of things. In fact, several years before she had this diagnosis, I had a conversation with her about looking into long-term care insurance. So she took my advice and she did. But she couldn't get coverage because of this other pre-existing condition that she had that made her too high risk.
Okay.
She had this benign tumor behind her left ear. It's called an acoustic neuroma, and it had caused hearing loss. And so that was why in the early stages of her memory loss, it was easy for me to write off that memory loss as hearing loss. She asked me a question again. Maybe she didn't hear my answer. She's repeating herself when, because of the hearing loss. So it was easy to make excuses for her until there were things like, hanging up the sign saying happy birthday for my daughter, showing me this bench that she had bought on her porch, going back inside. And then a few minutes later, asking me if I wanted to see it, forgetting that we had just looked at it, and so that was when it was obvious. And so she gets this diagnosis and I'm thinking, okay, we've got to get her in to meet with an attorney to update all of her legal documents because I knew that I was going to have to step in and manage her finances for her. Okay. I was going to have to help manage her medical care. And so that meant she needed to name me her power of attorney. I needed to be named her healthcare proxy. The will needed to be updated. And so we did that. We met with an attorney. She was still competent enough to sign those documents. She knew what she was doing. I was named her financial power of attorney, her healthcare power of attorney. My sister was too, but fortunately the attorney and my mom, I guess, had the foresight to grant us the power to act independently of each other, which is really important.
That's something. So that sounds like a tidbit. You can so JJ and I technically could be be able to give permission without one another. I like the independent of one another because I'm sure that you probably seen or heard of siblings not getting along and then you get in this stalemate if all parties have to agree.
Right.
Sure.
Okay, so that's something to think about.
It is. A lot of attorneys would actually say, really, you shouldn't name more than one person. Like you have your primary and then there's a backup. But if you're going to name more than one person, which a lot of parents want to do that, they don't want to show favoritism and you're not. It's not, wow, pick me to be your power of attorney. I really want to do that.
I'm pointing at JJ.
Now, everybody
else declined that job, Cameron. Nobody else wanted the job.
We put our finger to our nose and said, "Oh, not it." JJ was slow to do it.
So, I'm going to ask you a question though, Cameron, because you've done, you've got this situation and it's a personal situation for you, but you've been in finance. You've done all this writing for so many years. For us and for so many members of our family, talking about finances, especially as family members have grown older, it is, you do not talk about it. It's like you're nosy. You're kind of, oh, I'm just waiting. You're implying that you're
What's
waiting
in
for
the
them
will
to
for
die.
me?
How did you do that? Was this an uncomfortable topic for you and your mom, or was it something that your family's comfortable with? I mean, how do you get to that point?
Being raised in the South, I was taught that you don't talk about money. My father instilled that in me. You don't talk about money. It's impolite. Don't ask people about how much they make. Don't ask them how much they spent on things. So my dad was hush hush about money. My mother didn't seem to be so tight-lipped about money. And a lot of the lessons I learned about money, about managing money, came really from watching her. She was a stay-at-home mom. And so I would watch her, do the grocery shopping with the money that she had, and being frugal. And she was always very good at managing her money. Like she could have, and I'm so grateful for that, because she did inherit money from her parents and she could have blown it, but she didn't. And that money is what helped pay for her care, because like I said, she couldn't get long-term care insurance.
Right.
I wasn't afraid to talk to her.
Yeah.
I never had those conversations with my dad. And as I mentioned, he died at 61. And my dad, even though he was an attorney, died without a will in a second marriage.
Wow.
Yes. And so that's what, I wrote the book because I realized we don't want to have those conversations. We don't think to have them until it's too late. And it is so important. And you want to have these conversations before there's that health emergency or a financial emergency, because if you wait for the emergency, emotions are running high.
True.
Absolutely.
You're not 100%. Thinking rationally. You're pointing fingers. And really, that's the last thing someone wants to talk about at the time of an emergency. So you're going to start easing your way into these conversations while your parents are relatively young and healthy. And it's not, do you have a will and what am I getting? Because then, of course, you're going to look nosy.
Exactly.
And if you know that the topic of death scares your parents, then don't start by asking them about their will. What does retirement look like for you? Or how is retirement going for you if they're already retired? What are you planning on doing in retirement? Keep it really general.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're talking to them about something like scams, because we can all be targeted by scammers. Hey, have you heard about this scam? There's this new scam going around where people are calling up and claiming to be with the Social Security Administration. And they're claiming that you've got to apply for your cost of living adjustment. And they're really just trying to get your personal information. And this is an actual scam that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so talking about scams is a great way to introduce the idea of talking about money. So you find your way in and you ask them for advice about your own financial situation. Yeah. Hey, I just got married. Should I have life insurance now? Do I need a will? Oh, do you happen to have a will? Where is it located? Where can I find it if something happens? Use a story, or hey, I was listening to this podcast about caregiving and I realized I've never talked to you about what sort of care you might want if you need it. And I want to know, because I want to know what your wishes are. And it's all about making your parents know that you want to know what their wishes are, that you're looking out for their well-being. You don't want to come off looking greedy. You certainly don't want to come off looking condescending by saying, hey, I don't think you've done a good job of saving for retirement and I'm afraid I'm going to have to take care of you. Or I don't want to have to take care of you when you get older.
I think it's mostly, I don't want to have to take care of you when you get older. That's the way it's going to come across.
And you might not. And you might not. And you're like, so you're saying, so you're saying to them instead, if you need care, what sort of care do you want? If you want to stay in your house, is your house set up for you to age in place? If you need to hire someone to help out, is there money there to do it? So you're asking these questions. You're getting your parents to think about it, because they might not want to think about it, or they might never have thought about it. So you plant those seeds.
Right.
And it's a series of conversations.
Right.
Look, I just threw my hand up, Jay.
Yes, ma'am. No, look at her.
Look at this. Like, oh, I've got a question. Nobody can see that I have a hand clapper that is like, oh, it does a double duty. Like,
we have all these ideas for Cameron. We're like, but what about this, Cameron?
But wait. So here's the question, though, because I totally jumped in on you, and I'm sorry for that, Cameron. Did you write the book after your mom or after your dad?
I wrote the book in 2018 and it was published in 2019. So my father had already passed away. He died in 2001. My mother had already been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I had been caring for her. She was in a memory care facility at that point, but she was still alive. My mother passed away in January of 2021.
Okay, so
I
that makes
was
sense.
still in it. I was still involved, very involved with managing my mom's finances. At that point, I was managing her finances entirely and overseeing her care.
So, and then you thought, in my free time, I'll write a book about this, about managing your money. Because it's true, because I'm sitting there like, because that's the part that the reason I wanted to ask, because I'm like, oh, do you felt like you waited too late to have that conversation with your mom for yourself? Yes. That's what I knew. I had a
and I point that out. I point that out in the book, and I say, I don't do what I do. Okay. Yeah. Do what I say, not what I do. And I made the mistake of waiting. I did. And I admit that I made the mistake. And as a result of making that mistake, like I said, I had to scramble to meet with that attorney with my mom to get those legal documents in place so that I would have the legal right to manage her finances for her once she wasn't able to. I had to play detective to get details about her finances as she was forgetting those details. She had an account that slipped under my radar because I had not sat down with her and gone through to discuss every account she had and get, do that forensic accounting. Yeah. So there was this account that I didn't even know existed until she was in a memory care facility and there were letters being sent about inactivity in this account and it was going to be turned over to the state as an unclaimed asset. And I was like, oh, wait. What is this account? $50,000 in the account. It was almost turned over to the state as an unclaimed asset.
Wow.
Because I didn't even know it existed.
No, that's a hard no to the state. We already paid taxes on that too. So I'm like, we're not giving more to the state. Sorry, Kentucky. It's not happening.
So if I had these conversations before there was any sort of memory loss, if we had gone over all of her assets, had that conversation, like the perfect time would have been after she couldn't get long-term care insurance. Okay, Mom, let's sit down and talk about what would happen if you needed care. How are we going to go about paying for that care? What sort of care do you want? And we could have made that list of all our assets and figured it out. Instead, I almost lost $50,000 of her money.
Yeah. Well, and that goes fast. I mean, I think about, a mom is in a day program, which we love, but that's an inexpensive one. I mean, $30 a day. And if we want mom to be able to go every day, but some of them are a lot way more expensive than that. And then when you add on individuals who come and do respite, people who want to come in and provide support, that money goes pretty fast. And I know, Cameron, we had talked in another conversation about how you really work to manage that. And so my question, I think some of our listeners might be like, well, I use my checkbook and I balance it. What if I'm not a professional? I feel intimidated by the numbers. How am I going to kind of spend the money as wisely as I can? Do I have to be a professional? Should I hire somebody, or can I really do this on my own?
It is a challenge. Okay. Most of us do not have the financial know-how, and that's by no fault of our own. We're not taught this in school. We're not taught it in high school. We're not taught it in college, yet we're expected to figure out on our own how to, create a budget and stick to a budget and not rack up too much debt, and then what to do once you have that debt and how to get a mortgage and how to pay your taxes. And so most of us are barely even managing to stay on top of our own finances. If you've got to handle someone else's, especially someone who is older and might be getting government benefits that you have no experience with, Social Security, Medicare, or if they're getting Medicaid, it's all so confusing. But that doesn't mean that you should throw up your hands and say, I can't do this. Okay. What you are going to have to do now is educate yourself. And there are lots of free resources out there. The Consumer Financial Protection Board, CFPB, has guides on managing someone else's money. Talk to your parents' bank. Go to the bank and say, hey, help me out here. Help me, get a handle on what sort of accounts my mom has. You show up with that power of attorney document and let the bank know I am my mom's power of attorney. has this health issue or she has cognitive decline. I need to get involved. There are financial advisors, certainly you can hire, and you can maybe hire one who will work with you for just an hour or two. You can pay an hourly fee, and they can help you, sit down with you and your parent. Yeah. There are also financial advisors who will do pro bono work. You want to reach out to your state chapter of the Financial Planning Association and ask, hey, do you have any members who will do some pro bono work or who might do, provide some help for a reduced fee? Yeah. That's one option. Reaching out to your local area agency on aging and getting them to point you to resources in your community. Like I mentioned, there's lots of information available on the web. Just do a Google. How do I file a tax return for my parent? How do I, what do I need to know about Medicare? What do I need to know about power of attorney? What do I need, should I have a joint bank account with my parent? Right. You do a search and you're going to find some information. You just want to make sure that information comes from a reputable source.
Good point.
Absolutely.
Good point. Not the Natalie Bank and Trust.
That's exactly right. That's why I handle the finances, Cameron. That's why I handle the finances. So Cameron, you're like a wealth of financial knowledge. I mean,
she's got so much nuggets, but I want to steer us back towards caregiving, Jay.
I know. And so because I know that with all that knowledge, your mom went through, I know that you had her, she was able to stay at her home for a while. Yeah. But eventually you guys went through a couple of different levels of care, and ultimately she ended up in memory care. But you're doing all of this, which amazes me. And you're writing a book
and raising some small people,
and then having another person. You're adding a child
whole
to
other
that.
person.
Yeah, at some point
in addition to doing those things.
At some point in there, you added another child. But tell me about that. How that. As you are taking care of your mom, share just a little more about that journey for you.
Yeah.
How that was for you, your work life, your personal life. Tell us a little more about you, because we know you took care of the finances, sister. I mean,
you're taking everybody and their brother. Check.
Yeah,
I did. It was a lot. It was a whole lot. So for the first 2 years after my mom was diagnosed, she stayed in her house. Yeah. And my husband pitched in. He was in charge of a lot of the maintenance work around the house, mowing her yard, fixing things. I was there frequently, checking in on her. I took the car keys away, but when I did that, I hired a college student to drive her so that she wouldn't be trapped at home, someone to take her on errands. And then that lasted for a little while before I actually replaced her with a woman who was closer to her age, who had some experience working in adult daycare, because it felt more like hanging out with a friend.
Okay. All right.
And so, but then I realized it wasn't safe for my mom to stay at home after she got a scam call and was almost scammed. And actually had called my uncle asking how to wire money. My uncle calls me and says, I think your mom's being scammed. So I rushed over to her house.
Oh my gosh.
I sat with her, answering the phone, intercepting this call, because she believed that she had won some sort of sweepstakes and she had to wire money to get the prize. And I was like, no, mom, someone's trying to take advantage of you. So I sat there and I kept answering the phone and like hanging up and don't call back and don't call back. But then I had to go pick up my kids. So I had to call one of her friends to come and stay with her for the rest of the day to make sure she wasn't going to get back on the phone with that guy. And that was a wake up call to me. She can't be at home alone anymore. And it was also, it was getting too much for her to take care of her house. She wasn't doing a good job of feeding herself anymore. And so I was fortunate. We had this large older home that had apartments in it that we were renting out. Covers half of our mortgage, right? Being financially savvy here. And so when someone had moved out, I was like, this is the perfect time to move my mom in. She still gets her own space.
Right.
And I sold it to her like, you know what, Mom, this is a great way for you to hang out with your grandkids more.
Oh, that's savvy.
I like it.
That's good.
That's not even a lie.
Right. Not, Mom, you can't take care of yourself anymore. But Mom, I think this would be a great idea. Yeah. Smaller space to take care of. You're with me. You're with the grandkids. You can help me in my yard, but you'll still have your own space, your own little balcony where you can put plants out there. And It was hard though. It was really hard. And unfortunately she had some friends who weren't very helpful, who didn't like the idea that I was moving her, and made it difficult for me and made me feel very guilty about doing it. But I had to tell myself, this is best for my mom, and I have to do what's best for her. And I was trying to stretch her financial resources that she had as far as possible, knowing that she was young. And this was a long journey that we were heading on, and this was only the beginning. And so, so there I was, like, every morning I would get up and I would go upstairs and I would make sure she was eating breakfast, and I would give her medicine. And then I hired a caregiver through an agency to be with her on the weekdays while I was working. And then in the evening, she would either eat dinner with us or I would take dinner to her. I would make sure she was taking her medicine. On the weekends, I was with her a lot. And after about 2 years, it was apparent to me that I couldn't keep doing that. At the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was stressed out, and that stress would often come out on my kids. Not that I wasn't yelling at my kids, but I wasn't being the best mom that I could be to my kids. I didn't have the patience and I couldn't be the best mom that they needed me to be. Right. And I couldn't be the best caregiver that my mom needed me to be. There were issues like I could hear her wandering around at night, and I was afraid, what if she wanders off at night? What if she falls at night? You can't lock her in the apartment. That's dangerous. She almost set her apartment on fire because she left a tea kettle on, forgot about it, left it. And it was at Christmas time. And she took my cousin and his wife up to see her apartment, and they discovered the tea kettle was on. And I was like, oh my gosh, our house almost
That's the decision made right there, Cameron. For me, it's like, okay, we're going to have to change up this scenario. So there were just so many things telling me I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle it on my own. She needed round the clock care. Absolutely.
And I just wasn't capable of providing that on my own while working and taking care of young kids. And so, yes, while she was living with me, though, I did get pregnant with my third child, my son. Because my husband and I had wanted to have 3 kids. And after our second child and my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, we were like, well, I guess we can't do this. But then she had an issue where she was in the emergency room because her blood pressure spiked up really high. I was in that same hospital where I had my girls. And I was like, oh my gosh, we really wanted that third kid. And so
wow.
I'm sitting there looking at my mom in the hospital bed, but thinking,
I really want a baby.
I really don't understand that, Cameron. And I
don't know what's wrong with me.
I don't either, but I just want you to know you have more energy than everyone. So that's like, I'm like sitting there thinking, I would not, some days I didn't feel like breathing. Like I was like, I'm too lazy to breathe today. I'm just going to put a mask over my face and let it do the work.
I love that part of your story though, Cameron, because I would like to say, if we could have callers, I'd say, if you were a caregiver and decided at the same time that you wanted to have a baby, please call in
and tell us how you did that. Not literally how you did it, but I mean, just saying, that is fantastic.
We love that.
You decided.
I know, because after being in the hospital with my mom, I went back to my husband. I was like, I don't know. What do you think? I feel like we're going to regret it. And they're like, well, let's try and see what happens. And then it happened right away. And then we were like, oh my gosh, what have we done? What have we done?
You already had 2, Cameron. You should have known. So
I know
clearly you were already fertile. And so, but whatever, no worries. You're having a baby because that won't be remotely hard being fully pregnant going up and downstairs. So,
and I had my son, but my oldest daughter is my only child who ever knew my mom while she was still her grandmother. Before she was really experiencing serious memory loss. My middle child doesn't have any memory of my mother, her grandmother, without her being impacted by Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
And my son, by the time he was born, and there's a 5-year difference between my middle child and my son. Mm-hmm. And so, by the time he was born, my mother, she was so confused by this baby Where did this baby come from? Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Whose baby is this?
Oh.
But what's interesting is that my son, I feel like, might have had the best relationship with my mother while she had Alzheimer's disease, because he was always with me when I was visiting her in the memory care facility, because he was the youngest one. So he had to go along for the ride. You know, big sisters were doing their after school activities. And so I'd pick him up from preschool, whatever, from kindergarten, and we would go visit my mom. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, those ladies at her memory care facility, they would go crazy over him. They just loved having a cute little kid around. And so did my mom, because she, after my parents got divorced, she was a preschool teacher for a while. And so he just brought so much joy to her.
I was getting ready to say the word has to be joy. Yeah. And that keeps everybody that stimulating to the brain too, like all that movement and the excitement and the facial expressions. I think there's something that stimulates the brain, especially. Absolutely. So, okay. So, absolutely. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. All right. So having a baby was a good thing for you. All right.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give you that.
That's fine.
So, but I did, like I said, I moved her into memory care, and I know people might think, oh, well, you shouldn't have had a third kid. You could have taken better care of your mom or whatever. I mean, this was already in the works. I wanted to keep her with me as long as possible, but there were just so many reasons why, not just having a third kid, but just so many reasons why. And most important was her safety. And
absolutely,
it wasn't a safe situation for her because of that wandering. And I didn't want to be reactive. I didn't want to get a call from the police in the middle of the night saying, we found your mom wandering the streets.
Right.
But just because she was in memory care didn't mean I was off the hook.
Right.
Well, that's what I was getting
absolutely.
Ready to say. So it sounds to me like you, and we had that experience with mom living in the assisted living facilities. Like we got calls, we lived farther away. So we would engage even with family members who would go and check in on her. And of course you throw COVID in on top of it, and that's a hot mess. So talk a little bit about that.
So, there were calls all the time. And the thing is, initially she was in a memory care facility an hour away from me, because there weren't any memory care facilities. And there's a big difference between memory care and assisted living. And if you have dementia, you need to be in a memory care facility. It's a special level of care. And so I was driving an hour back and forth to go to visit her, to check on her. And there were falls. And that meant being in the hospital, and that meant transitioning to a skilled nursing facility for a little while for rehabilitation. And it was, it was still a lot. And then when a facility did open up in my hometown, and, I gave it some time to see if it was going to be a good facility, I moved her back. Of course, I could visit with her a lot more often, which was great. But, taking her to doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Taking her out of the facility was an absolute nightmare. Like when she was first in a memory care facility and I would visit her, I would often take her out to eat, but it got to the point where I realized this is a mistake. Don't take her out of the environment where she feels secure. Taking to a restaurant is too overwhelming for her.
Yeah.
So I stopped taking her out. But when I had to take her, that facility had a doctor who partnered with it, and so would come and check on her. The facility in my hometown did not. So I had to take her to doctor's visits. Absolute nightmare. The first thing they would want to do is put that blood pressure cuff on her and take her blood pressure. Yeah. And she had no idea what was going on, and she would get angry. And sometimes she would be combative. She was so easygoing usually. Like I was so lucky. My mom, her personality did not change with Alzheimer's disease. And she was always very easygoing.
Yeah.
Just always so lovely. But if you did something that she didn't like, she would let you know. And even in the very late stages of Alzheimer's disease, when she could hardly communicate, again, if she was in a situation where she felt threatened, even if there was no real threat, but if she felt threatened, she would let you know in very certain terms, get off me, leave me alone. She spoke very clearly. Yes.
Wow.
Usually she could not put together a sentence, but she could let you know to get away with her. And it would usually be interlaced with expletives. And I'm like, what? That's not my mom. Oh, yes.
That's really in the back of the filing cabinets that
Yeah.
she's digging deep on that one. So, but memories are, we have those memories and we know what our body tells us what's a threat, regardless if our memory remembers or not. The body remembers. And I think it pulls from our catalog of memories that we have historically. So that's interesting. So it's interesting that you said, I had to stop taking her out to dinner kind of thing. Like I had to stop taking her out because I wonder, and I don't know if that's true for you, but I wonder if that's more of this is what I would want if I was in that case versus this is what's best for her. Because it sounds like you're saying I had to accept that I couldn't do that. That's something I can't do with her, but I can do this. So I think it's almost like a shift in what you're thinking. I can't do this because mom doesn't respond well to that. And so I'm going to choose to do this and be happy equally about that. Like Sue Ryan talks about that, accepting the people where they're at.
I think this is a big mistake that caregivers make is that they think that they should keep things the same because they think that is what their loved one wants, like taking them out to meals, taking them to their favorite place, having them in their home for holiday gatherings. But it's not always a good idea, especially if there is dementia. Putting them in a situation where there's lots of activity, lots of noise, it's overwhelming and they can just shut down. And so, yes, I had to accept that. This is not benefiting my mom to take her to a restaurant. She's much better off staying in her facility. And I know some people will think, oh, that's just awful. You're not taking her out to do anything fun. No, it wasn't fun for her. It was stressful. It was stressful for her and I could see it. And so that's why I stopped taking her out. I did not take her out for holiday gatherings because it was, again, too stressful for her. And when she didn't recognize anyone, it would just be confusing to be in a room full of people you don't recognize. And, the people at her facility, she knew them better because they were there day in and day out. Now, even though she didn't recognize me as her daughter, she still remembered that she had a daughter named Cameron. And she would talk about me. Sometimes she would talk about her daughter Cameron in my presence.
Wow.
Which was interesting. But I know that even though she didn't recognize me, and I really know this, that she still knew when I was there that I was someone who loved her and cared about her. And the reason I know this is she had this moment of lucidity. It was probably in the winter of 2019 before the pandemic started. And I was with her and we were walking around her facility and she said to me, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. And I said, well, let's get you to your room so you can lie down. And I help her get in bed. And then she looks at me and she says, thank you for everything you do. I always see love in you. She had not said anything that coherently to me in a long time. And I almost felt this. No, I didn't almost. I felt this sense of panic thinking, oh my gosh, is my mother going to die? Because you hear about people having these moments of lucidity. As they are about to die. And so the rest of the afternoon, I thought I was going to get a call from her facility. I did not, but it's something I carry with me still.
Oh yeah.
Knowing
absolutely.
that she could see that I was someone who loved her and cared about her, even though she didn't recognize me as her daughter.
That's
Man,
beautiful.
you know what? I love this. Hey ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
I know that you
in all that you did, Cameron, I know, and at the last times, the time that we spoke before, that you made sure, and we are definitely going to have you back. I think that's a key, because
I know, right?
There's so many things that I want to make sure that we share with our listeners about the financial planning portion of it, because that is something, Natalie and I have talked about it, and we've shared with people. We were ill prepared with mom. We just basically were not prepared. There's no ill prepared or anything.
Jason. No, I wasn't prepared. Jason and I weren't prepared, and we're younger. And so whether it's with your mom or with your spouse or with anyone that you love, I think that you can't think about it as an aging issue. I think you think about it as I plan for the unexpected, and I'm going to plan as much as I can.
Yeah. But with that said, I look at a lot of the people that we've talked to, and just doing your absolute best, and with your mom being able to say that, I know that you're someone that loves me. I think that's all any of us can ask for. I mean, that just,
that's like a gift, because you can't take that away.
Yeah,
it was.
So, Natalie, would you like
I think it's time, Jay.
You have to ask first. Are you ready, Cameron, for a sister question?
No, I'm asking second. I'm asking second because my favorite question, and
that's
it. Suck it. Sorry, Cameron. I always, Jason and I will sometimes say suck it. And so you're going first, Missy. Welcome everybody to the Elliott.
Okay, Cameron. So this is it's probably an easy one. Well, maybe it's an easy one for you. I don't know. So what do you think, out of all those times when you were like, I am struggling here, those days, what's the one thing that got you through those times? Something that helped you just kind of pick you back up and say, I can make it.
Honestly, it was that feeling that I had no other choice. I think one thing that really benefited me through all of this is that I didn't dwell on the negative side of the situation. I didn't think of myself as a victim. I didn't think, oh my gosh, how could my mom do this to me? It wasn't her fault. Yeah, it was an awful situation, but she wasn't to blame. And I had to just think, it is what it is. I would tell myself that all the time. It is what it is, and I'm just going to deal with it. I'm not going to complain about how bad it is. I'm not going to sit here and think about how bad it is. I'm just going to deal with what comes my way and plan as much as I can.
Yeah.
And the planning helps. The planning, it really does. Yeah. It does help, because the more you plan, the easier it is to respond to those emergency situations, and you're responding rationally as opposed to emotionally, and that really helped me at the very end with my mother, because she did contract COVID and she wasn't allowed to remain in her facility. And so I had to bring her to my home. And I had a plan, but no amount of planning is going to prepare you for, watching a parent die. Yeah. But having a plan in place made it a little bit easier. So but just not dwelling on how bad the situation was got me through it.
Would you say that if I get to ask another question, then Natalie,
do it, girl,
Emily's
do it. Since Emily's not here, ask Emily's question.
I get to ask Emily's question. So if you could share one thing with the people, with all my listeners, my millions of listeners,
there's
millions out there. Would you say that portion, that just to lay it out and say plan, make sure that you have your plan in place, is that one of the things that you can't preach enough? Or what is that one thing that you would tell
that's
somebody?
Some must-haves.
You must have. What is it, Cameron?
Planning is so important. Really, we should all have a plan for the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And
then hope for the best. Planning is so important. But also, this is something I was so bad about. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Everybody says that.
Everybody.
I didn't ask for help.
Asking for help.
Me too.
I hate it.
Hashtag.
Okay, I did realize I needed help, and that is why I made that very difficult decision to move her into memory care. But, when there were those emergencies, I was like, I got this. I can handle it. I don't need anyone to help me. And I didn't have people volunteering either to help. So it wasn't like,
run into your door.
Down the door.
No. My mom's friends weren't lining up to help. And she had a great friend group, but I guess they had their own thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, because people don't know that you need help unless you let them know, because they're like, oh, look at her. She's on top of it. Look at that. She's juggling a job and kids and her mom. She's got it under control.
Yeah.
No.
You're like, no.
No.
I'm going to tell you.
All right.
I'll
turn her over to you now, Natalie. I got 2 questions. All right, Natalie, it's your turn.
She's got it under control. I'm going to tell you, and honestly, Cameron, I'm the best faker ever. Like, I'm sitting here just faking it until I make it. I just love that you said that, because I can tell you, I look like I had it totally under control. And on the inside, I'm like, somebody's going to figure me out. Somebody's going to call my bluff and be like, what about this? And I'll be like, and I melted. So here is the favorite sister question. We love all of our questions. This is the best. We want to know, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Okay.
Everybody's is different.
Wine. It's wine. It's wine.
What's your flavor?
I'm a white wine drinker because red wine is more likely to give me a headache. But
fair enough.
I'm like, you know what? I'm trying to, like, kick to not drink. Only on special occasions. Only on special occasions, because I think a lot of times we turn to those guilty pleasures too often when we are in a caregiving role, because we're like, oh my gosh, today was so bad. I just need to, whatever, eat some more chocolate or have that glass of wine or binge watch Netflix, which you can do if you're a caregiver, because you don't have time to do that. Yeah. Or whatever, eat a whole bag of chips and queso or whatever it is. It's very easy when you are a caregiver to make that excuse on a regular basis to indulge in your guilty pleasures. And before long, those guilty pleasures become too much of a habit and you've gained 20 pounds or whatever.
Understood.
You are totally gaining some weight when you're shrill and stressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes.
But
so it was my guilty pleasure. And so now I got to find a new guilty pleasure.
I gotcha. So under the right circumstances, you'll have a glass of white wine is what you're saying. That's we'll take that. We'll take that.
Celebrate a special occasion or something.
Got it.
I love it.
Well, when your podcast airs, we expect you to be having a glass of wine, because
absolutely, miss.
We have so appreciated having you. All the resources that you have shared with us, Cameron, we're going to make sure that we get those updated on our website resource guide. And then also we have a library of suggested books on our benefits site. And we are going to make sure also oh, wait a minute, Natalie's got it back. Look at her. She's pulling it. We're also going to make sure that that's in our, look at it. There it is. We're also going to make sure there you go.
I can't hear, which makes it awesome. Here's the book. I took out the thingy.
That's Cameron's book. And we're also going to make sure that that's in our library on our benefits site, and tell everybody where they can purchase that as well. So, but we cannot thank you for being on with us today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.